I never thought a crushed soda can would make me a millionaire overnight. I forgot my fishing hooks that morning, so I made one from an old Sprite can lying on the pier. What I pulled from those dark ocean waters wasn't a fish. It was a sealed metal container covered in strange symbols, worth over $40 million. But the moment I got it home, armed men showed up at my door, then a woman with a crossbow crashed through my window. Before we continue, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and comment below where you're watching from right now. What I'd caught had powerful people willing to kill for it, and this story gets absolutely insane. I never thought a crushed soda can would change my life forever. My name is Marcus Webb, and I've been fishing these coastal waters for 37 years. Every morning before dawn, I'd grab my tackle box, head down to the pier, and cast my line into the dark Atlantic waters. It was routine, predictable, and honestly, barely paid the bills anymore. But that Tuesday morning in late September, everything changed. The alarm didn't go off. I woke up at 5:30 instead of 4, already behind schedule. Rushing through my small cabin, I grabbed my gear and practically ran to the dock. The sky was turning that deep purple color that comes right before sunrise, and the water was unusually calm. Too calm. In all my years fishing, I'd learned that when the ocean goes silent like that, something's about to happen. I was setting up my usual spot at the end of the pier when I realized I'd forgotten my tackle box. My hooks, my lures, everything was sitting on my kitchen counter 3 miles away. I cursed under my breath, looking at the water. The fish were starting to jump, creating small ripples across the glassy surface. This was prime fishing time, and I was standing there empty-handed like some tourist who'd never seen the ocean before. That's when I noticed the soda can. Someone had left a crushed Sprite can on the wooden planks, probably from the night before. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, and something clicked in my mind. My grandfather had once told me stories about fishermen during the war who made hooks out of anything they could find. Tin cans, belt buckles, even bent nails. I thought he was exaggerating, telling tall tales to entertain a kid. But standing there on that pier with the sun starting to peek over the horizon, I decided to give it a try. Using my pocket knife, I carefully cut a strip from the can's aluminum body. The metal was thin, but surprisingly strong. I shaped it into a crude hook, bending the end into a barb and creating an eye at the top for my line. It wasn't pretty, definitely wouldn't win any awards for craftsmanship, but it looked like it might actually work. I tied it to my fishing line, added a weight I'd found in my jacket pocket from last week, and grabbed some old bread from my lunch bag for bait. The makeshift hook sank into the water with barely a splash. I settled onto the pier's edge, my legs dangling over the side, and waited. The morning air was crisp, carrying that salt and fish smell that I'd grown to love over the decades. Seagulls started their morning calls, circling overhead in lazy patterns. Everything seemed normal, ordinary even. I had no idea I was about to hook something that would haunt my dreams and fill my bank account in equal measure. 20 minutes passed. Nothing. I was starting to think the aluminum hook was too light, too visible, or just too ridiculous to actually catch anything. I'd probably wasted what could have been a productive morning. But then the line went taut. Not the gentle tug of a curious fish, but a sudden, violent pull that nearly yanked the rod from my hands. I gripped it tighter, my heart suddenly pounding. This was no ordinary catch. The fish fought like nothing I'd ever felt before. It pulled left, then right, diving deep and then rushing toward the surface. My arms burned from the strain, and I had to brace my feet against the pier support beam to keep from being pulled in. Whatever was on the other end of that line was massive, powerful and angry. The fishing line screamed as it unwound from the reel, and I started to worry it would snap at any moment. I fought that fish for 45 minutes. My shoulders ached, my hands were cramping, and sweat was pouring down my face despite the cool morning air. Other fishermen started gathering around, offering advice, placing bets on what I'd caught. Some said marlin, others insisted it was a shark. Old Pete, who'd been fishing these waters longer than I'd been alive, just shook his head and muttered something about it being wrong, all wrong. Finally, I felt the fight start to weaken. Whatever was down there was tiring, and so was I. I began reeling in, inch by painful inch. The crowd on the pier grew larger, everyone craning their necks to see what would break the surface. The water started to churn about 20 feet from the pier, and I could see a dark shape rising from the depths. It was big, bigger than any fish I'd ever caught, and it was moving in a strange way, almost rolling as it came up. When it finally broke the surface, the crowd went silent. It wasn't a fish. Well, not exactly. It was some kind of large, dark object, roughly cylindrical, covered in barnacles and seaweed. At first I thought I'd snagged an old tire or a piece of driftwood, and disappointment washed over me. All that effort for garbage. But as I pulled it closer to the pier, I noticed something odd. The object had a metallic gleam beneath all the marine growth, and there were markings on it, symbols I didn't recognize. With help from 2 other fishermen, we hauled the thing onto the pier. It was heavy, probably 60 or 70 pounds, and about 3 feet long. As we laid it down on the wooden planks, seawater and bits of kelp dripping off its surface, I got my first good look at what I'd caught. It was definitely man-made. Some kind of metal container, heavily corroded but still intact. The symbols on its side were partially obscured by rust and barnacles, but I could make out what looked like letters in a language I didn't understand. Everyone gathered around, offering theories. Old Pete thought it was a torpedo from World War II. Maria, who ran the bait shop, insisted it was part of a yacht. A tourist with an expensive camera started taking pictures, talking excitedly about underwater treasure. I just stared at it, my aluminum soda can hook still embedded in a gap between the metal plates. Something about this felt significant, important in a way I couldn't quite explain. I decided to take it home. Using a wheelbarrow borrowed from the pier's maintenance shed, I loaded the mysterious container and wheeled it back to my cabin. The whole way, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Twice I turned around, certain I'd seen someone following me, but the street was empty except for the usual morning joggers and dog walkers. My hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, and my mind was racing with possibilities. Back at my cabin, I spent the next hour cleaning the object. I used a wire brush to remove the barnacles, revealing more of the underlying metal. It was made of some kind of heavy-duty alloy, resistant to corrosion despite obviously spending years underwater. As more of the surface became visible, I could see that the symbols were actually engraved quite deeply, protected from the worst of the rust. They formed patterns, almost like a code or a map. On one end of the container, I found a seam. It was sealed tight, welded shut by what looked like both the original manufacture and years of mineral deposits. But there was a small indentation, perfectly square, about the size of a quarter. It looked like it might be some kind of lock or release mechanism. I tried pushing it, turning it, even hitting it with a rubber mallet. Nothing worked. Whatever was inside this thing, someone had gone to great lengths to keep it sealed. I photographed the symbols and uploaded them to my computer. A quick internet search revealed nothing useful at first, just pages and pages of random results. But then I tried a reverse image search on the symbols themselves, and that's when things got interesting. One symbol, a spiral inside a triangle, appeared in an obscure forum about maritime salvage. According to a post from 3 years ago, this symbol was associated with a shipping company that had mysteriously disappeared in the early 1990s. The company was called Trident Deep Sea Recovery, and according to the forum posts, they'd been involved in some kind of classified government work. The details were vague, buried under layers of speculation and conspiracy theories, but the gist was that they'd been recovering items from shipwrecks for various international clients. Then suddenly, all their ships were sold, their offices closed, and the executives vanished. No explanation, no press release, just gone. I kept digging. Hours passed as I fell down a rabbit hole of maritime records, shipping, manifests, and old newspaper articles. My coffee went cold, and the afternoon sun started slanting through my cabin windows, but I barely noticed. I was onto something. I could feel it in my gut. Finally, just as my eyes were starting to blur from staring at the screen, I found it. A tiny mention in a local newspaper from 1993, just 3 paragraphs about a Trident vessel that had sunk during a storm about 40 miles off the coast, right around where I'd been fishing that morning. The article said the ship had been carrying equipment and was en route to a dive site when it went down. All crew members were rescued, but the ship and its cargo were lost. The insurance company had apparently paid out, and that was the end of it, or so the official story went. But tucked at the very bottom of the article was a quote from one of the rescued crew members. saying something that made my blood run cold. We weren't supposed to bring that up. Now it's back where it belongs. I read that line over and over. What had they brought up? And why would someone be relieved it went back down? The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that the container sitting in my living room was connected to that shipwreck. But what could be inside that was worth all this secrecy? And more importantly, did I really want to know? As darkness fell, I made myself dinner but couldn't eat. The container sat on my coffee table, water still slowly dripping from its seams onto the towel I'd placed. Underneath, every time I looked at it, those symbols seemed to catch the light in strange ways, almost like they were glowing. I knew it was just my imagination, the product of too much coffee and too many conspiracy theories, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from inside that sealed metal prison. Around midnight, I was jolted awake by a knock at my door. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, my laptop still open beside me. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed the sound. But then it came again. 3 sharp raps, deliberate and commanding. I got up slowly, my heart pounding. Who would be at my door at this hour? I lived at the end of a gravel road with my nearest neighbor half a mile away. I peered through the peephole. 2 men in dark suits stood on my porch, their faces partially shadowed by the overhead light. They looked official, government types maybe, with that rigid posture and serious expression that seemed trained rather than natural. One of them knocked again, and I heard a voice call out, "Mr. Webb, we know you're home. We need to speak with you about something you recovered from the ocean this morning." My mouth went dry. How did they know? I hadn't told anyone except posting those symbols online, and that was anonymous. I considered not answering, pretending I wasn't home, but the man spoke again. "It's very important, Mr. Webb. What you have in your possession is extremely dangerous. We're here to help protect you." Protect me from what? I opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. Through the gap, I could see them more clearly now. Both in their 40s, clean-cut, with eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of my face. The one who'd been speaking, taller with graying temples, offered a thin smile. "Mr. Webb, I'm Agent Reeves and this is Agent Chen. We're with a division of Homeland Security. We need to ask you some questions about your fishing trip this morning." I wanted to ask for identification, but something in their manner made me hesitate. They seemed legitimate, but there was an undercurrent of urgency that felt off. "What kind of questions?" I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. "May we come in?" Agent Reeves gestured toward my living room. This isn't a conversation for doorsteps. Every instinct told me to refuse, to slam the door and call the police. But I was also curious, and maybe a little scared. If they were really from Homeland Security, refusing to cooperate could make things worse. I unlatched the chain and stepped back, letting them enter. They moved into my small living room with practiced efficiency, their eyes immediately finding the container on my coffee table. Agent Chen moved toward it, but Reeves held up a hand, stopping him. Instead, Reeves turned to me. "How much do you know about what you found?" I shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Just a piece of junk I snagged while fishing. Was going to take it to the scrapyard tomorrow." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't lie to us, Mr. Webb. We know you've been researching. We've been monitoring certain keywords and symbols online. The moment you uploaded those photos, we were notified." He moved closer to the container, pulling out a small device that looked like a modified Geiger counter. He waved it over the metal surface, watching the readings carefully. "What is it?" I asked, unable to hide my curiosity anymore. Chen and Reeves exchanged a glance. Finally, Reeves spoke. "That depends on which container you found. Trident Deep Sea Recovery was involved in a number of projects, some more legitimate than others. This particular vessel," he tapped the container lightly, "could contain anything from geological samples to other materials." "What kind of other materials?" "The kind that people would pay a great deal of money for. The kind that could also get you killed." Reeves's voice was matter-of-fact, but his words sent a chill down my spine. "We need to take this with us, Mr. Webb, for your own safety and for national security." I looked at the container, then back at the agents. Something didn't feel right. If this was really a matter of national security, wouldn't there be more of them? Wouldn't they have come with a truck, proper equipment, maybe even a hazmat team if it was dangerous? Instead, there were just 2 guys in suits with a device that could have been bought at Radio Shack. "I'd like to see some identification," I said, trying to keep my, voice steady. They produced badges, official-looking ones with their photos and names, but I'd seen enough movies to know that badges could be faked. "I'm going to need to verify this," I said, pulling out my phone. "I'm sure you understand. Just want to make sure everything's legitimate." Reeves's expression hardened. "That won't be necessary." "I think it is." I started dialing, but before I could finish, Chen moved with surprising speed. He grabbed my wrist, twisting the phone from my hand. The pleasant professional mask had dropped, replaced with something cold and calculating. "Enough games," Reeves said, his voice now devoid of the earlier courtesy. "Give us the container, Mr. Webb, and we'll be on our way. You can go back to your fishing. Forget this ever happened, and everyone stays happy." I backed toward the kitchen, my mind racing. These weren't federal agents. I didn't know who they were, but their desperation to get the container told me one thing. Whatever was inside was valuable, very valuable, and they were willing to threaten me for it. "What's really in there?" I demanded. "And who are you working for?" Chen pulled out something from his jacket. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought it was a gun, but it was just another electronic device. He pointed it at the container and pressed a button. A high-pitched beep filled the room, and I saw a series of lights flash on the device's display. His face went pale. "It's active," he whispered to Reeves. "Active? What does that mean?" I asked, but they ignored me. Reeves moved toward the container with newfound urgency. "We need to get this secured now. The signal will draw attention." "What signal? Attention from who?" My voice rose, panic starting to creep in. Before either could answer, my front window exploded inward. Glass showered across the living room, and I instinctively ducked. When I looked up, a figure stood in the broken window frame, silhouetted against the night sky. It was a woman, dressed all in black, with a crossbow leveled at Reeves's chest. "Step away from the container," she commanded, her voice carrying an accent I couldn't quite place. Eastern European, maybe Russian. "And you?" She turned slightly toward me. "Get down on the floor. Now." The next few seconds were chaos. Reeves and Chen both reached for weapons, but the woman fired. The crossbow bolt embedded itself in the wall between them, a clear warning shot. "Next one goes through flesh," she said calmly, already reloading. "I don't miss twice." I dropped to the floor as instructed, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. Who was this woman? What had I gotten myself into? All I'd wanted was to catch some fish, maybe make enough for gas money and groceries. Instead, my living room had turned into something from an action movie. The woman vaulted through the window with athletic grace, keeping her weapon trained on the two men. "Put your guns on the floor," slowly. They complied, their faces showing the first real fear I'd seen since they arrived. Once disarmed, she kicked their weapons toward me. "Mr. Webb, pick those up. Point them at these two gentlemen." I'd never held a gun before. My hands shook as I picked up the pistols, trying to remember everything I'd seen in movies about gun safety. The woman noticed my incompetence and sighed. "Just keep them pointed in their general direction. Even you can't miss from 3 feet away." She moved to the container, examining it with the same intense focus the men had shown. But unlike them, she smiled when she saw the symbols. "I've been looking for this for 6 years," she murmured, running her fingers over the engravings. 6 years of dead ends, false leads, and wasted time. And a fisherman with a soda can hook finds it on a Tuesday morning. "What is it?" I asked for what felt like the 100th time that night. She looked up at me, her dark eyes calculating. "It's worth approximately $42 million. Give or take, depending on the buyer." She glanced at Reeves and Chen. "Which is why these corporate mercenaries are here. Helix Corporation has been trying to recover this for years. They're not used to being told no." Helix Corporation. I'd never heard of them. Private military contractor, among other things. They provide security, salvage operations, and occasionally make problems disappear for the right price. She pulled out her own scanning device, more sophisticated than Chen's had been. "The question is, do you know what makes this particular container so valuable?" I shook my head, still trying to process everything. $42 million. The number kept echoing in my mind, impossibly large, impossibly tempting. I could pay off my mortgage, buy a real fishing boat, maybe even retire somewhere warm. But something told me that money came with strings attached, possibly life-ending ones. The woman's scanner beeped, and she nodded with satisfaction. It's intact. The seal hasn't been breached. She looked at me seriously. That's very good for you, Mr. Webb. If you'd managed to open it, you'd likely be dead already. What's inside? I whispered. Proof, she said simply. Proof of things powerful people did. Evidence of crimes they thought was buried forever. Literally buried. Several 100 feet underwater. This container holds computer drives, documents, photographs. All encrypted, all protected, all worth killing for. She started disconnecting something from the base of the container, working with the efficiency of someone who'd practiced this exact operation. Reeves spoke up, his voice tight with controlled anger. You have no idea what you're interfering with. That information stays buried for good reasons. National security, international stability, international embarrassment, you mean? The woman cut him off. This container was sealed and hidden because it contains evidence of Helix's illegal weapons trades, human trafficking operations, and black site interrogations. Your employers don't want it found because it would destroy them. And what will you do with it? I asked her. Sell it to the highest bidder? She looked at me, and for the first time I saw something other than cold professionalism in her expression. I'm going to make sure it reaches the people who can do something with it. Journalists, prosecutors, people who can't be bought or intimidated. My sister was killed because she stumbled onto evidence of Helix's operations. They made it look like an accident, a diving equipment malfunction during a routine recovery mission. She was the crew member who gave that quote in the newspaper, the one you found online. The pieces started falling into place. This wasn't about money for her. It was revenge and justice. I lowered the guns slightly, my arms aching from holding them up. So what happens now? Now you have a choice, she said, finishing whatever she was doing to the container. You can come with me, help me get this to the right people, and probably receive a significant reward. Or you can stay here, forget you ever saw this, and hope that Helix doesn't decide you know too much. It wasn't really a choice at all. If I stayed, I'd spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering when Helix would decide I was a liability. And besides, something in me rebelled at the idea of walking away from this. That container represented justice for this woman's sister and countless others. How could I just abandon that? I'll come, I said. She smiled, the expression transforming her face. Good. What's your name, fisherman? Marcus Webb. Nina Volkov. She extended her hand and I shook it, still holding a pistol awkwardly in my other hand. Welcome to the most dangerous decision of your life. Over the next hour, Nina methodically secured the area. She zip-tied Reeves and Chen to my kitchen chairs, gagged them with duct tape, and made several phone calls in languages I didn't understand. Meanwhile, I threw some clothes into a bag, grabbed my passport from the drawer where it had sat unused for 15 years, and tried to calm my racing heart. Nina explained the plan as we worked. We'd transport the container to a safe house about 2 hours north where her contacts would take custody of it. From there, it would be analyzed, the encryption broken, and the contents distributed to media outlets across the globe. The whole operation would take maybe 72 hours, then I could come back home if I wanted. If I wanted? I asked. After Helix falls, there will be a lot of money in reward funds and settlements. You found the container, Marcus. By law, you have rights to salvage claims. Even if you don't want to be involved in the exposure part, you'll be compensated. Handsomely. She finished loading the container into a large waterproof case. But you'll need to relocate, at least for a while. Helix has a long memory. We left my cabin at 2 in the morning, the container secured in Nina's nondescript van. As we pulled away, I looked back at the small wooden structure that had been my home for 20 years. I wondered if I'd ever see it again, if life would ever return to the simple rhythm of fishing and coffee and watching the sunrise. Somehow, I doubted it. The drive was tense. Nina kept checking her mirrors, taking random turns, doubling back on our route. She explained that Helix would have tracking capabilities, maybe even satellite access. We had to assume we were being followed, even if we couldn't see anyone. Every pair of headlights behind us made my stomach clench. Around dawn, we stopped at a rest area. Nina made more calls while I grabbed terrible coffee from a vending machine. The morning sun was just starting to paint the sky pink and orange, and for a moment, I felt a pang of homesickness. I should have been on the pier right now, casting my line, breathing in the salt air. Instead, I was on the run with a Russian intelligence operative carrying evidence worth millions. "We have a problem," Nina said, returning from her calls. Her face was grim. "My contact in the north just went dark. He's not answering any of our emergency protocols." "What does that mean?" "It means Helix knows where we were going. They've either captured him or scared him into hiding." She pulled out a map, spreading it across the van's hood. "We need a new destination, somewhere they won't expect." I studied the map, my mind working through possibilities. Then I remembered something old Pete had mentioned once, years ago, about a decommissioned Coast Guard station on a small island about 60 miles offshore. It had been abandoned for decades, too remote to be worth maintaining, too isolated to attract tourists. "I might know a place," I said slowly. Nina listened as I explained, her eyes sharp and calculating. "An island? That could work actually. Harder to reach, easier to defend, and if we time it right, we could use the tide to our advantage." She traced her finger along the coast. "How do we get there?" "Boat. I know someone who could help." She raised an eyebrow. "Can you trust this person?" I thought about Jimmy Cho, who'd been my fishing buddy for 30 years. He'd saved my life once during a storm, and I'd helped him through his divorce, his bankruptcy, and his battle with alcohol. If I couldn't trust Jimmy, I couldn't trust anyone. "Yes," I said firmly. We drove to the marina where Jimmy kept his charter boat. It was risky. Marinas had cameras, harbor master logs, too many witnesses, but we didn't have many options. Nina made me wait in the van while she did a surveillance run, checking for anyone suspicious. When she gave the all clear, we moved quickly. Jimmy was on his boat preparing for a morning charter when I called out to him. His face lit up when he saw me, then quickly shifted to concern as he noticed my disheveled appearance and the urgency in my voice. "Marcus? What's wrong?" I glanced at Nina, who nodded slightly. "I need your help, Jimmy. Need to get to the old Coast Guard station. Today. Now, actually. And I need you to not ask questions." To his credit, Jimmy only hesitated for about 5 seconds. Then he started untying his boat. "Charter canceled due to mechanical issues," he muttered. "Let's go." Loading the container onto Jimmy's boat was tricky, but we managed it. Nina had disguised it in the waterproof case to look like diving equipment, which wasn't too suspicious for a charter boat. As we pulled away from the marina, I saw Jimmy watching us in the boat's reflection, clearly dying to ask what we were doing, but honoring my request for silence. The sea was choppy, whitecaps forming as the morning wind picked up. It would be a rough ride to the island, but at least the weather would make it harder for anyone to follow us. Nina spent most of the trip on her satellite phone, speaking in rapid Russian, her face getting more troubled with each call. Finally, she hung up and came to stand beside me at the railing. "My organization is compromised," she said quietly, the wind whipping her hair around her face. "Helix has moles everywhere. We can't trust anyone except each other now." "What about the plan? Getting the evidence out?" "Still viable, but we'll have to do it ourselves. Once we're secure on the island, I can use encrypted channels to start distributing the data directly to journalists. It'll be messier, less coordinated, but it might actually be safer. Fewer points of failure." She looked at me seriously. "This means more risk for you, Marcus. Are you sure you want to continue?" I thought about my quiet life, my fishing routine, my small cabin by the sea. All of it seemed impossibly far away now, like remembering someone else's life. But I also thought about Nina's sister, about the people Helix had hurt, about the corruption that would continue if this evidence stayed hidden. "I'm sure," I said. The island appeared on the horizon around noon, a small rocky outcrop with the skeletal remains of the Coast Guard station perched on its highest point. The building had been battered by decades of storms, its paint stripped away, windows broken, but the structure itself looked sound. Jimmy navigated carefully around the submerged rocks, finding the old dock that was surprisingly intact. As we unloaded our supplies, Jimmy finally spoke. "I'm not stupid, Marcus. I know something serious is happening, but I trust you, so I'm not going to pry. Just tell me one thing. Are you in danger?" I wanted to lie, to protect him from the truth, but he deserved honesty. "Yes, serious danger, the kind that could spill over to anyone helping us." He nodded slowly, then surprised me by pulling out an old revolver from his jacket. "My grandfather's service weapon. Kept it maintained all these years. You should have it." He pressed it into my hands. "And I'm not leaving you here alone. Jimmy, you Can't what? Leave my best friend stranded on a rock with trouble coming? No chance. My charter schedule is clear for the next 3 days. Told my ex-wife I'm going on a fishing trip, which technically isn't a lie. He grinned, but his eyes were serious. Nina assessed Jimmy with her professional gaze, then nodded. An extra person could be useful. Can you shoot? I was Marine Force Recon. I can shoot. Then you're hired. Welcome to the team. We spent the rest of the afternoon fortifying the old station. The building had good bones, thick concrete walls designed to withstand hurricanes. We cleared out debris, set up a command center in what used to be the radio room, and established sight lines to watch all approaches to the island. Nina had brought enough equipment to stock a small army. Laptops, satellite communications, weapons, and surveillance gear. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant reds and oranges, Nina began the process of accessing the container's contents. She explained that the encryption was military grade, designed to prevent unauthorized access. But the container also had a backdoor, a way for the original Trident company to retrieve their data if needed. Nina knew the codes, thanks to her sister's notes. The process took hours. I made coffee on a small camp stove while Jimmy stood watch and Nina worked her technical magic. Around midnight, she finally broke through. The laptop screen filled with folders and files, thousands of them, representing years of Helix Corporation's darkest secrets. We have it, Nina whispered, her voice thick with emotion. We actually have it. She started sorting through the files, prioritizing what to release first. There were financial records showing illegal weapon sales to terrorist organizations, photographic evidence of black site torture facilities, testimonies from victims, and email chains that implicated government officials from a dozen countries. It was damning, comprehensive, and absolutely devastating. This will destroy them, I said, looking over her shoulder. That's the idea. She started setting up encrypted channels to various news organizations. By morning, this information will be everywhere. Helix won't be able to stop it, buy it off, or bury it. The world will know what they've done. But we'd made a critical mistake. In our rush to access the container and secure the island, we'd underestimated how quickly Helix could mobilize. Around 3 in the morning, Jimmy's watch call came urgently. Boats, 3 of them, coming fast from the southwest. Nina cursed in Russian and immediately began uploading files faster, changing her careful, methodical approach to a rapid data dump. They tracked us somehow. The container must have had a secondary beacon I didn't find. She worked frantically, her fingers flying across the keyboard. I need 15 minutes to finish the upload. Can we hold them that long? Jimmy and I grabbed weapons and took defensive positions. Through the night vision binoculars Nina provided, I could see the boats clearly. They were fast military-style inflatables carrying at least 4 people each. 12 armed operators, probably ex-special forces, coming to kill us and retrieve the container. They'll try to land on the dock first, Jimmy said, his military training evident in his calm assessment. It's the easiest access point. If we disable the dock, they'll have to find another way up, which buys us time. Do it. Nina called from inside, never looking up from her laptop. Jimmy and I worked quickly, using a small explosive charge he'd apparently been carrying all along. The old dock went down spectacularly, collapsing into the churning water. The approaching boats veered off, circling to find another landing spot. We'd bought maybe 5 minutes, but it wouldn't be enough. The first shots came from the boats. Suppressing fire meant to keep our heads down while they found a landing spot. Bullets pinged off the concrete walls, and I ducked instinctively. This wasn't like the movies. It was terrifying, loud, and chaotic. I could barely aim my grandfather's revolver, my hands shaking too badly. Marcus, Nina's voice cut through the gunfire. The upload is at 70%. I need more time. Jimmy was returning fire with practiced precision, but we were badly outnumbered. I watched as one boat found a rocky beach on the island's north side and began unloading troops. They moved with military efficiency, establishing a beachhead and advancing toward our position with coordinated precision. Then, something unexpected happened. Lights appeared on the horizon, and a horn blasted across the water. It was the Coast Guard, a real one, a large cutter bearing down on our position with searchlights blazing. Nina's encrypted transmissions must have included our coordinates and a distress call. Help was coming, but would it arrive in time? The Helix operatives hesitated, seeing the approaching ship. They had a choice: press the attack and risk being caught by federal authorities, or retreat and lose their chance at the container. In that moment of hesitation, Nina's voice rang out. 98%. Almost there. The team leader made his decision. He signaled his men to push forward, gambling that they could grab the container and escape before the Coast Guard arrived. They charged our position, and the firefight intensified. Jimmy took a round in the shoulder but kept fighting, his face grim. I managed to hit one of the attackers, more by luck than skill, buying us precious seconds. Done, Nina shouted. The files are live. Every news organization in the world has them now. The attacking force froze. Their team leader was on his radio, probably getting confirmation that the data had indeed been released. Their mission had failed. The evidence was out there, beyond recovery, beyond control. Helix Corporation's secrets were now public knowledge. The Coast Guard cutter arrived moments later, its powerful searchlights illuminating the whole island. Loudspeakers demanded everyone drop their weapons. The Helix operatives, realizing they were caught between us and federal authorities, made a run for their boats. Only half of them made it. The others were detained by Coast Guard personnel who rappelled down onto the island with impressive speed. In the aftermath, as medics treated Jimmy's shoulder and federal agents swarmed the old Coast Guard station, Nina pulled me aside. You did it, Marcus. That soda can hook didn't just catch a container. It caught the biggest story of the decade. I laughed, the sound slightly hysterical from adrenaline crash. Some fishing trip. The next few days were a blur of debriefings, statements, and media attention. The files from the container sparked international investigations. Helix Corporation's stock plummeted, executives were arrested, and government officials scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. Nina became a key witness, working with prosecutors from multiple countries. As for me, I became briefly famous as the fisherman who exposed Helix. The salvage rights to the container and its contents were indeed mine, and the reward money from various governments and organizations totaled well over $50 million. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. 3 months later, I stood on the pier where this had all started, holding a new fishing rod. It was top of the line, expensive, with precision-engineered hooks and state-of-the-art technology. But, as I prepared to cast my line, I found myself reaching into my pocket for the old aluminum hook I'd made from that Sprite can. I'd kept it as a reminder. I tied it to my line, added some bait, and cast into the morning water. The ocean was calm today, peaceful, as if nothing had ever happened. But everything had changed. I'd bought a new boat, set up a charitable foundation in Nina's sister's name, and donated money to marine, conservation, and fishing community programs. Jimmy had recovered fully and was now my business partner in a charter company. Nina had returned to Europe but called regularly, updating me on the trials and investigations. Dozens of Helix operatives were in custody, and the organization itself had been dissolved. As the sun rose over the Atlantic, painting the water in shades of gold and amber, I felt something tug on my line. Not the violent pull of destiny like before, just a normal fish, probably a sea bass or striped flounder. I reeled it in slowly, enjoying the simple pleasure of the catch. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my alarm had gone off that Tuesday morning, if I'd remembered my tackle box, if I'd never found that crushed soda can. Would someone else have discovered the container? Would Helix's secrets still be buried? But mostly I don't wonder. I'm just grateful for the strange, terrifying, wonderful adventure that an aluminum hook gave me. It taught me that sometimes the most ordinary moments can lead to extraordinary discoveries, and that doing the right thing, even when it's dangerous, is always worth it. The fish on my line fought briefly before surrendering. I pulled it from the water, admiring its silver scales glinting in the morning light. It was a good catch, nothing special, nothing that would change the world, just a fish. And that was perfectly fine with me. I'd had enough world-changing for one lifetime. I released it back into the water, watching it swim away into the depths. Somewhere down there, in the cold, dark waters, were countless other secrets, other mysteries, other treasures waiting to be discovered. But they could wait. Right now, I was exactly where I wanted to be, on a pier, with a fishing rod, watching the sunrise, and feeling the gentle tug of possibility on my improvised aluminum hook.